This is NextGenWeb. We're at the Broadband Properties Summit in Dallas, Texas. We're joined by Galen Updike. He's with the Government Information Technology Agency for the state of Arizona. Galen is on a rural broadband policy panel here at the Broadband Properties Summit. Galen, can you tell us a little bit about your agency and what they're doing?
Sure. Our agency is the state's CIO office, and it's also our director is the state CIO, and we also have, as part of it, broadband policy, which I am the telecommunications development manager. So I assist our state CIO with broadband telecommunications policies. And we have recently we were identified by our governor at least as the recipient of the large grant that came out from NTIA for mapping and planning of broadband. And so our office handles that. We've been involved in policy for a long, long time. My particular management duties really don't include any operational things. Mainly I'm a policy person, and I do a lot of outreach to the state and the various political subdivisions and economic development groups in the state.
Now, speaking about mapping and the intersection between mapping and policy, can you discuss the importance of mapping to developing sound broadband policy?
Yes, I certainly would be happy to. In fact, it's integral. You cannot have a good understanding of what your policy ought to be until you know where your deficits are, until you know the extent of the issues that are before you, and an approximate cost as to what you're going to try to improve if you can. In Arizona, we have 14 ILECs that are telecom ILECs, meaning that they are in charge of at least the voice and pairs of wires that go everywhere for dial-up, and we also then we work with them for broadband and of course the DSL side of broadband, and we also work with a number of other groups. The cable industry has recently been involved with this, and all of them we're now asking them to work with us and provide us the data that is necessary for the mapping. And we cannot really make good judgment calls as to what we will do next or where the help is needed until we understand where a middle mile is and where the unserved and underserved are.
Now, touching on that subject, the difference between unserved and underserved, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about where the priorities should be once you determine who the underserved and the unserved are.
It's really interesting. We disagree a little bit. From our anecdotal information in Arizona, it tells us there's probably 1 million or so people that don't have adequate broadband, that they would be classified as unserved. We differ a little bit. That's about 16%. We differ a little bit with some of the industry folks that they say broadband is up about 92–93% of the state, or maybe a deficit of 7% in the unserved category. And we're trying to resolve that through our mapping process, because the speed of the problem, or the solution to the problem, will lie in how grave the issue is, how many unserved really are. We have to keep our populations of unserved down and reduce it as much as possible, and in fact bring these people into a served environment at least minimum broadband speeds, which is what the standard is now, 200 kilobits upload and 768 download. And we think about 1 million people, or 250,000 homes approximately, that don't have that access yet.
One more question, Galen. Can you talk about the importance of the private sector in deploying broadband?
Sure. Private sector right now has their footprint is about 95%. 95% of all of the broadband infrastructure is in the private sector right now, at least. And so they play a critical role, and their needs are essentially what the state's needs are. As a matter of fact, my highest priority is to help, through policy, improve return on investment for the private sector who owns the broadband infrastructure. We've got to make sure that somehow along the way, those who are in rural areas and are in unserved areas can provide somehow through good policy, through right-of-way, whatever, from a state perspective, the wherewithal and the improvement in return on investment so that the private sector can build out to these unserved areas. And walking that line is difficult, but I think is really, really possible, especially with an enlightened policy of right-of-way and of tax policy and other policies that government can provide. Government should not own broadband. That's the last resort that anybody ever wants to see, is to have government try to keep up with Moore's Law and all the technology that goes along with the infrastructure needs.
Thanks for joining us today, Galen.